Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Robert J. Harris, author of the novel A Study in Crimson, Sherlock Holmes, 1942. Robert, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, it's good to be here at last after all our slightly technical difficulties.
Sure. Well, if someone hasn't yet heard about your new novel, A Study in Crimson, Sherlock Holmes, 1942, how would you describe the novel?
Okay. Okay. We all have a Sherlock Holmes novel. I had been writing for a while some middle grade adventures called the Conan Doyle mysteries, which are about the teenage adventures of Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, in which he solves mysteries in Victorian Edinburgh. And so I was trying to come up with a really good Holmes-type mysteries for him to solve. And so that made me think maybe I could write a Sherlock Holmes novel. That would be interesting to do. But then the problem with that is there are a lot of Sherlock Holmes pastiches, as they're called it. There are probably hundreds and hundreds of them. And I thought, well, why would anybody care if I wrote another one? But then when I had the idea of taking the Universal Studio Pictures film series with Basil Rathbone, which updated Sherlock Holmes to 1940s, I suddenly thought, well, that's something nobody's done. This is a very famous series of Holmes films, very much part of the kind of legacy of Sherlock Holmes. And maybe if I did it as a novel, that would be very much in the spirit of Conan Doyle. It would be a new twist on it that interest people and give it a fresh perspective. So it's Sherlock Holmes in wartime London in 1942, as he's seen, played by Basil Rathbone, starting with Universal Pictures' A Study in Terror in 1942. So I set the novel in the year of that, the first of those films. They went on to make 12 films. And so I've had in mind the performances of Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes, Nigel Bruce as Dr. Watson, plus the actors who played Lestrade, Miss Hudson in those films. And with that as the nucleus, went on to do it. So the plot in this being that occurred to me was to have someone imitating the crimes of Jack the Ripper, committing murders on the same dates. And Sherlock Holmes has got to find out who's doing this and why. And that I thought that have an imitation of those 1888 murderers kind of kept one foot in Victorian Sherlock Holmes, at the same time as updating it to the 1940s of wartime London. And so I think I've been getting quite a bit of good response from readers as well as great reviews to say that I've actually got that atmosphere right. It really, as in those films that were made at the time, it doesn't feel like a big jarring transition. The characters are still very true to Conan Doyle. And even though there's now cars and aeroplanes and telephones, it still feels like a very standard, proper Sherlock Holmes story. And so I was working to make it work out that way. And the reaction so far, I say in reviews and readers, has been that I've actually got it right. So I'm very pleased about that. And the fact that people are taking an interest in it rather than it being, it's just another Sherlock Holmes novel.
Sure.
So that's the gist of it. Is Sherlock Holmes is hunting down an imitator of Jack the Ripper in 1942 London during the blackout, which is a great cover for a murderer. And he calls himself Crimson Jack and sends a taunting poem to the police in the way that the original Ripper wrote taunting letters to the police too. And so it's about Holmes' investigation trying to track down this killer before he completes the whole series of murders that he's imitating.
Well, what was your first experience reading Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories?
Well, I kind of grown up on TV versions. I'd seen Peter Cushing, an actress, play him on BBC, and I'd seen these Basil Rathbone films on Sunday afternoon TV here. So I was mainly, often like a lot of people, my first exposure to Sherlock Holmes was basically TV, seeing him on TV. So Basil Rathbone was always my picture of what Sherlock Holmes would be like. When I first was reading Sherlock Holmes, I went to the library in my teenage years and got a big volume of all the Sherlock Holmes stories out of there. And I flicked through and looked for the most interesting title. And I saw the Red-Headed League. And I thought, well, that's probably about a bunch of people with red hair trying to take over the whole world or something like that, something massive. So I read that. And of course, there's nothing like that, but it's a wonderfully clever and fun story. And so then I was hooked. I read the rest of the short stories and the novels and reading them ever since. So, and I also, that was my first experience of Sherlock Holmes. And there's a magic about Sherlock Holmes, and Conan Doyle is such a good writer. There's so much warmth and humor and really good quality writing in what he does that I think it hooks everybody in who makes a start on.
What was your own writing journey that led you to writing and getting your first novel published?
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was a graduate student here in St Andrews University many years ago, I met this fabulous young woman, Debbie, who was from Florida, and she was over on a Rotary scholarship. I was doing at that point, failing to complete a PhD on early church Latin, and she had already completed a PhD on medieval bestiaries. So we were both kind of, living in the past. But we hit it off, and she was already working on a fantasy novel called The Mages of Garlon, which eventually came out as The Burning Stone, the first of a trilogy. And I was kind of, helping a bit out of that, but she was a published author before I was. Then she went on to write more books, but when she got pregnant with one of our children, she was like, "Oh no, we've got this contract to write these 3 books. You're going to have to help me with this." So I ended up just helping her to, flesh out chapters, do first drafts of things. Then Jane Yolen, you've mentioned in our previous conversation that you noticed I'd written books with Jane Yolen. We've become good friends with her, and she found out I'd written some of the parts of Debbie's books and said, "You should write your own books. Come write a book with me." So she brought me in to collaborate with her on what turned out to be 8 novels, some based on Scottish history, some on Greek mythology. And so I just do what women tell me to do. And so that by following them, I ended up becoming a writer. I always written as a child. I used to make comics and write stories and stuff, but I never considered it seriously as something I would do as a career. But with their encouragement, I got into it. So Jane and I did all these books. And then I wrote a couple of historical teen fiction novels, one about Leonardo da Vinci, one about William Shakespeare. It was hard work getting the first one published. Getting a book in print is not easy. Those 2 books were published over here. The first one, Leonardo book, became a huge success in Italy where it was published. It's still being published there now. It's one of the best sellers. There was a big gap. And then I got back into writing kind of middle grade fiction, writing comic fantasy adventures set here in St. Andrews, which were my Loki trilogy, where Greek gods and monsters end up in the town where I live, which was nice, saved a lot of research. And then I went on to do the Arthur Conan Doyle mysteries, which I mentioned earlier. We had the idea of having the young Arthur Conan Doyle having adventures as a teenager, which would inspire him to write Sherlock Holmes. And then, I got into writing for grown-ups because I had this ambition to write a novel carrying on the adventures of John Buchan. John Buchan, who'd created Richard Hannay, the hero of the 39 Steps, and written a whole series of thrillers, 5 of which featured Richard Hannay. But Buchan, in his last novel, before he died, was speculating that all the heroes of his various books would then be involved in the Second World War. They'd be fighting for king and country and that. But he never lived to write that story. And so I thought I would do that. And luckily, my youngest son had got a job in publishing, publishers in Edinburgh. And it turned out that they actually liked this idea. So I wrote the 31 Kings, which was also published by Pegasus in the US. And that was very well received. And after that, I got my idea for writing a Sherlock Holmes novel, taking the template of the 1940s set films with Basil Rathbone to be a kind of refreshing way to look at Sherlock Holmes, to be faithful to Conan Doyle, but to have a whole new angle on it that would give us different insights into the characters. And so I've been very lucky as an author. Authors' lives can go up and down. I've been dead as an author a couple of times, but now I've been in print for about 10 years now. I've got a second Sherlock Holmes coming out next year, a third Richard Hannay book the year after that. So I'm very fortunate to have an actual career going now and to stay in print. And it's wonderful I kind of do miss my writing for younger readers, but I haven't got time to fit it all in one day. So that my adult writing has taken a good bit of time, but it's been very well received. It's really encouraging for me that things I wanted to write because I was excited about them. Other people have really enjoyed them too. So I'm hoping to just keep that going for as long as I can.
So do you have a title for the next Sherlock Holmes novel?
Yes, it's completed actually. It would have been published in the UK this year, except there's kind of a COVID backlog. Many titles were postponed from last year. So this book, which although it's finished, will not be out till next year. It's called The Devil's Blaze, Sherlock Holmes 1943. And in this, Sherlock Holmes is investigating an outbreak of cases of spontaneous human combustion. And this investigation leads him to have to go and consult Professor Moriarty, who's working for the government at this point. And so it's a chance to bring in the Moriarty story with a whole new element of the war background. In the films, in the second of the Holmes films in that series, Sherlock Holmes and the Secret Weapon, Moriarty is played by Lan Atwell, the great actor. And so it's not compatible together. I've taken that performance and the idea of Holmes and Moriarty meeting in the 1940s, but given my own spin on it to make it a big, quite an exciting adventure story with lots of danger and traveling up and down the country. And I wish it was coming out now because people are writing to me now saying, "Oh, when's the next one coming out?" I say, "Well, it's actually going to be next year because of all the COVID things." So if you can just hang on there and read my other books in the meantime, you will get a great adventure of Sherlock Holmes versus Moriarty against the background of World War II.
So I'm curious, what is your writing process when you're working on these adult novels? Do you outline extensively before you start writing, or you more of an
Yeah.
instinctive writer? How does that work for you?
Well, I found it's best if I get the whole thing very well outlined. What I do is get the basic idea. I write that down. It's like the blurb on the back of the book, describing it. And if I've got that, then from that, I'll then write an outline.
Nerds! Dreaming of a change of pace? Let NerdWallet help you compare your way from here to there. Compare investing accounts to expand your portfolio and your horizons. Then, use NerdWallet to compare mortgage rates for a home with peace and quiet built in. Compare your way there. Find the smartest financial products for you on NerdWallet. NerdWallet Compare Inc. NMLS 1617539. NerdWallet is not an investment advisor nor an investment broker. Information is for educational purposes only.
My first adult book, The 31 Kings, because it was a bit of a gamble, because I'd not written a book for grown-ups before, I thought I had to find the publishers, my potential publishers, with a really detailed outline to show I can really do this. I'm not just some guy writing kids' books who now thinks he can write for grown-ups. So I wrote a very detailed outline. It was 6 pages of single spacing. And I took that to my publisher, my editor, potentially at that point in Edinburgh, and we met, and she took me out for brunch, and she'd printed up this outline. She put it on the table in front of me, and she said, "This is brilliant. Can you do a sequel?" And I hadn't even thought of that at that point. And they offered me a deal that day. So that was really exciting. And so but then the next book I did for them, Castle Mcnabb, I was sold on like a page and a half outline. So when it came to write it, it was actually hard work. I had to actually make up the story as I was going along. And I've learned my lesson from that. It turned out it's a really good book. But now I always have a very detailed outline, so I know exactly what I'm doing. Because otherwise the writing process, you can get so tangled up in working out the story while you're writing it. It's better to have the story all worked out beforehand. So that's what I do now. I do work out a lengthy, both the Sherlock Holmes novels, I've had very detailed outlines. Particularly, of course, because they're mysteries. If it's a mystery, you've got to know what the solution is. You've got to know where the story is going. You can't just make it up as you go along. So, yes, they've had very detailed outlines. And of course, as I'm writing it, I get new ideas to enrich it and add things to it. But the basic outline is always there under it. I worked out in the first place, and the direction it's going in. And I always know what the climax is going to be and build towards that.
And so I'm curious, what novels have you read recently that you enjoyed?
Well, in terms of mysteries, what I've really enjoyed is Fred Vargas's novels. She's a French historian, archaeologist, and she writes a series of novels about Commissaire Jean-Baptiste Adamsberg, who's a commissaire of police in Paris. And he's just the most dreamy, bizarre guy who has no business being in the police force at all. And these stories are steeped in history and mythology. They're very clever mysteries with fantastic characters. And so I've been loving it. A recent discovery of mine a few years back. And I've also just started reading more recently Christopher Fowler's Bryant and May novels, in which 2 octogenarian detectives in London run the Peculiar Crimes Unit. And they also have very interesting historical backgrounds, very bizarre crimes. And that's what I like. I'm not really very much into procedural or, dark noir stories. I like something that's a bit bizarre. And both those series are the ones I enjoy reading now. Those are my contemporary favourite authors. Of the classic authors, I'm a huge fan of John Dixon Carr, who is the famous as the author of The Impossible Crime and Locked Room Mysteries. And luckily he wrote 70 novels, so I've got some still left to read. But he inspired me to try and write things as clever as that. So in The Study in Crimson, which we're talking about just now, my first Sherlock Holmes novel, the first 3 chapters are a locked room crime. Somebody disappeared from inside a locked room. And I have Sherlock Holmes investigating that, because I kind of thought, if people are coming to this and don't really know the film this is based on, I want them to feel they're comfortable with Holmes and Watson, that this is a kind of an old-fashioned kind of a case for them to solve. And Holmes can show off all his skills of spotting all the clues, figure out how this impossible disappearance could have happened. Then when we come on to them going back to London after this investigation and start the Ripper case, which is not an entirely typical Sherlock Holmes novel, because Conan Doyle doesn't really write serial killer stories. People would be into it. So John Dixon Carr has played very much into this. So there's another locked room mystery that's in the newspapers that Holmes and his brother Mycroft solve halfway through Study in Crimson. And the second book, The Devil's Blaze, also starts with a bizarre crime that Holmes solves in the first 2 chapters before moving on to the main mystery. So yeah, so all these things have a great influence on me. And so I do enjoy reading Vargas and Christopher Fowler's novels now. Luckily, there's more of them to go. I've not read them all yet. Once I finish them, I'm not sure. I'll have to search for somebody else who's just as good.
That's great. Well, what writing advice would you offer for those who are working on their own stories and novels?
Well, my advice for writing is a couple of things. The first one is don't be afraid to write badly, because sometimes I'm sitting writing and I'm thinking, this is awful. This is just dull and terrible writing and flat prose. I just keep going and write it. And then sometimes I go back to it and I think, oh, it's just not so bad. And anything that isn't great, I think, you can fix it. So I think some people get so held back. Every sentence, every page has got to be perfect before they can move on. I say, well, no, find the inspiration and just pour it out. And if it's not quite up to scratch, you can always go back and fix it. And editors will come back and tell you. So don't be afraid to just go for it. Don't worry whether it's good or not. Get it down on paper first. And the other thing would be to finish something. I mean, always, if you're starting out as a writer, I mean, when I was a kid, I used to start so many novels and stories and never finish them. I just lose interest. So it's part of the discipline is you've got to write the story to the end. Even if it's a short story or a novella, write it right through to the end, because you'll learn so much doing that. I read a great bit of advice once in a magazine. It was that an author, a budding author, what you should do is burn your first novel. Your first novel should be your practice run. You'll learn so much from doing it. You go back, and my first novel was a fantasy novel, because my wife was writing fantasy adventure novels. They got published. I had to go at doing one, and I got about 150 pages into it. And I taught myself to type to do. That's how long ago this was. We did typewriters back then. And I went back over it. I thought, this really isn't very good, but at least now I know I can write. I won't run out of things to say after 20 pages. So I think, yes, don't be scared to write badly. Get the thing down there and persevere to the end. Even if you're not happy with what you've done, get to the end of it, and then you can go back and look at it again. And I think when you've done that, you've actually exercised your writing muscles. And this first book might turn out to be good when you work on it, or if it isn't, you've learned enough to write your next one. And that's I think, my soundest advice for anybody setting out writing. And also, be prepared for rejection. We all go through that. Don't let it get you down. I mean, just keep going. Millionaire Novel, that was my first published solo novel after working with Jane Yolen. We'd published it in America. Both of them turned it down. And I sent it to a publisher in London, and they absolutely loved it and asked for another book. So, and it became a huge success in Italy, I think I mentioned earlier. So that, persevere and take the knocks. My writing career has died twice, and I've just kept going, and it's revived again. And I say now I'm actually very, very lucky to have a new book out every year. But to get to that point, you've got to just take the knocks. Sometimes like being a boxer, and you only win every 10th bout. The rest of the time you're getting punched in the face. Luckily now, I'm winning most of the bouts. I'm not getting punched in the face quite so much. But I'm friends with lots of writers, and I know you go through tough periods. So you have to be pretty tough about it and have confidence. And hopefully that confidence is well placed, that you actually are writing well and you're not just deluding yourself. But right. Which is why other people have got to read your stuff. A lot of people read your stuff, and if they tell you this is no good, they're probably right. And if they say, no, this is good, you should stick with it. They encourage other writers that you might know, friends who will be honest with you, or in my case, my wife, who edits my stuff and has no qualms about telling me when I've not done it well enough. If there's something wrong with it, she'll just be cruel to me and tell me how rubbish it is. I have to go back and work on it some more. So, that's the thing. You can't just get stuck in your own head and fantasize you're writing a masterpiece, because maybe you're not. But I think you do have to have perseverance. It can be tough to get in print. Even when you get one book out, it doesn't mean you're automatically going to have a second book out. The second book can just be a struggle to find a publisher for that. I know plenty of people who've had that struggle, but they've persevered and they've gotten through. And I know them personally. I know they've got the talent and they can write well. So, you've got to be pretty tough about it. And I managed to tough out through 2 droughts. And now things are going pretty well for me right now. I've got very good relationships with my publishers in the USA and over here. And things are going very, very well. And the book's getting a lot of attention in magazines and podcasts like yours and other places. I'm really pleased that people find it an interesting enough idea that it's worth telling people about it.
That's great. Well, where can people find you online if they'd like to learn more about you and your latest novel, A Study in Crimson, Sherlock Holmes, 1942?
Right. I always have an afterword to my books. At the end of it has my website address, and that means people are able to write to me and say how much they've enjoyed it. So it's www. It's Harris, HARRIS, hyphen authors, AUTHORS, I think it says .com. Yeah. Not .co.uk. It's one of those. And that's my website. And it's got everything about the games I've designed and the books I've written and what I'm working on and background on the books as well. And so there's a lot of good stuff there people might be interested in reading about. Some of the things I've written to be published elsewhere online, I will reproduce on there so people can read them. It needs updating, but it's got a biography of me. It's got some of my wife's books as well. And the website was set up as a present for us many years ago by friends of ours. And so made the effort to make it entertaining. When I first of all communicate with people with the website, he said, I came across your website by accident. I've not read any of your books, but I've really enjoyed reading your website. It's really good fun. So you go to that Harris-authors.com. You can find out all kinds of things. And if you forget the address, it's at the very end of every book I write in the afterword. It has that bit at the back. So we can find out about this stuff.
That's great. Well, again, we've been speaking with Robert J. Harris, author of the new novel, A Study in Crimson, Sherlock Holmes, 1942. The novel is on sale now, so go buy a copy. And Robert, thanks for doing this interview.
Thanks to you as well.
Dreaming of adventure beyond your backyard? NerdWallet can help you compare and find the smartest credit cards to get there. Use NerdWallet to compare travel cards with bonus miles to go from working from home to relaxing far, far away. Then use NerdWallet to compare cashback cards and turn everyday purchases into a beachside cabana big enough for the whole family.
Or sand for the third tower.
She's the only boss you'll be answering to this week. Nice castle. Compare your way there. Find the smartest financial products for you on NerdWallet.